and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my raw top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose a big holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money brought your great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at you, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, as always, Chris J. And tonight we have a good show. This is pretty much what I happen to do a lot of shows and eventually. And that is rant about Zionist and Israel at some point of the show, and this will be pretty much the entire show, but talk about their influence over the United States via the powerful lobby known as AIPAC. And I feel like, you know, people will probably say, why do you talk about this so much? What's your problem with it? And it's just that it seems that there's this total blackout on this country that we have such a special relationship, as it's been called. That's one way of putting it. With these, ultimately, are nothing short of parasites that inhabit the Israeli government, psychopathic, parasitic leeches. Netanyahu, in the past, Perez, Shimon Peres, and Mehmed Begin, who once said that the people of Israel, the Israelis, not the people of Israel as in the Israelites described in the Bible, but the people of Israel, modern Israel, as he called them pretty much, that they believed that they were racially superior, as the Zionists do believe. And there's this blackout on all kinds of coverage of it in the mainstream media where you hear nothing of it because of Operation Mockingbird. So the last 30-something years since the Operation Mockingbird was enacted, you hear nothing, no negative criticism towards Israel. And then once you cross that line, it's like no other country. You don't get this reaction when you talk about the Saudis or you talk about the Turkish or any other government that's allied with, if you criticize the alliance with the United States as one of its other allies, as we've seen with the Donald Trump campaign. One ally that he'll criticize the relationship, for example, with the United States and the Saudis, with the United States and the Turkish government, but he won't touch the Israeli government. Because he knows that once he does that, if he wants to do that, he'll be finished. Plus, he has a very good relationship, and he's owned by Zionists. And he's bragged about this over the years. And you see Hillary Clinton is a big-time AIPAC donor or AIPAC recipient of money, has spoken at AIPAC in 2007. That's where she gave an infamous speech talking about her intentions to preemptively bomb Iran, who is perhaps Israel's biggest opponent and the only one of the two true stable governments, I guess you could say, in the Middle East. 3 stable governments in the Middle East that truly oppose Zionism. That'd be the governments of the Houthis in Yemen, who are currently in the state of a very ugly civil war, and they don't even control a lot of the country. Syria, where this has been a horrible civil war, and they and they have about 60% of the population under control of the government there, but it's still in the state of a civil war with foreign-backed mercenaries from 64 different countries make up the supposed Syrian, in quotations rebels. So the Syrian terrorists that the Syrian government is currently fighting. And then Iran is stable at the moment with no civil war, and the government does not have a Rothschild bank connected to it. Its people do not have to endure that debt slavery that the Rothschilds will put on your country once you have your central bank in their ownership. The Rothschilds control the vast majority of the world's central banks, with just a select few not being in them. And Iran's one of those countries. Iran's also a country with a pretty powerful military that once repelled successfully an invasion by Saddam's military that at one point was the world's fourth largest military in the world, and was also at that time was enjoying the perks of a United States aid at that point. Where at that point, remember, Saddam received the key to Saddam Hussein received the key to Detroit at one point. That was his relationship. He had a pretty good relationship with the United States back in the 80s. And during that time, he invaded Iran, and Iran and Iraq went into an ugly war that went on for a few years. The Iran-Contra scandal came about, where a lot of it, really, the people did not hear a lot of the truth about what was really going on, especially the part with the Nicaraguan paramilitary forces and the Contras trafficking cocaine, to the extent that not only did the United States had some hand in the cocaine trafficking, but that they were practically the lead facilitator in the cocaine trafficking through Central America during the 1980s, and from Central America into Mexico, and then later into the United States and into the urban cities, as was revealed by Gary Webb, journalist at that time, that the United States government was pushing crack cocaine on the urban communities to cause destabilization of the urban communities inside the United States. And with all that, Israel has 411 nuclear weapons. Yet for years they've been telling us how big of a threat that Iran is. They are a country that has not signed on to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and ultimately, out of all the countries on the planet, which leaders do you think are made the most? These leaders are definitely extremely psychopathic, sociopathic. These are very bad dudes. As it comes down to, it reminds me of the Trump's words when he was talking about the terrorist in Guantanamo. He's going to fill up Guantanamo with very bad dudes. We're going to put some very bad dudes in Guantanamo. Just a choice of words by, I suppose, the presidential candidate, which to me shows that Trump in no way, shape, or form has any idea of actually winning the campaign. It's all going to go to Hillary in the end, as been planned for years, for Hillary to eventually win the election, and then we'll probably have a war with Iran shortly after, martial law, all that good stuff, all that fun stuff that we'll be having to endure here in the United States, while also Israel will continue to get even more and more money from the United States tax dollars. And I'm not saying fun and good stuff. Obviously, extreme sarcasm, more like horrific and criminal stuff that will be going on inside this country by our government that is ultimately heavily influenced by the Israeli government and the Saudi government has somewhat of influence over our government. And you have other people who turn to media to talk about our government, talk about the Saudis, but they will not touch Israel, and it's very poisonous to the truth community that we have these people that ultimately, when it comes to Israel, they don't say anything much different than what the mainstream media has to say. And a lot of times we even demonize Palestinians and will go as far as to pretty much push the straight words of Israeli myths, like I've seen before on some select alternative media channels. The ones that usually say that, oh, we're the conservative alternative to the mainstream media or whatever. They think all the mainstream media is too liberal or whatever, and then they're these people that the false patriots. This is the tainted part of the patriot movement inside this country. There's a lot of good sectors of it, a lot of good people in it, but ultimately is 100% that some of these people are 100% supportive of Israel and the murder that they do to the Palestinians, and also what they've done to Americans, this USS Liberty and the Lavon affair that many Americans don't even know happened. These two events, it's not our textbooks, that's for sure. And I mean, Israel attacked a United States Navy ship, and as we've had survivors of the USS Liberty attack on here. 1967 happened on June 8th, 1967. Israel attacked the USS Liberty, and it was intentional to start a war with Egypt, and the United States to be dragged in. And Israel and Egypt at that time had just started the war, I believe. And also to make clear, Israel were the ones that ultimately crossed the line and invaded. They invaded Egypt. I don't know why the history textbooks seem to get that simple fact that there was posturing. But who eventually actually crossed the line and started the war was Israel. They bombed hospitals. They killed a lot of Egyptian civilians. They bombed civilian areas in Egypt like they do to Gaza, and they have done to Gaza for the last 68 years. But yet there's this thing that say that Israel and the Israeli government were just protecting themselves, or that Israel were the ultimate victim in the war. But it was probably Egypt was probably the biggest victim in the war, or actually no, Egypt was the second biggest victim in the war, and the Palestinians were the biggest victim in the war because Israel used this as a justification that could make their life hell worse than it already was behind that wall. Well, it wasn't a wall yet, but behind that border. And now they've been losing their land ever since. And the 67 wars is a thing of the past. Now it's these little specks of the West Bank is what's left, and a little tiny Gaza Strip with one city where they're all herded into. So when they bomb, they kill a bunch of them at one time. Absolute horror scenes of children being killed, children having a normal day, and then all of a sudden the bombs start falling. And people here in the United States have the nerve to say that they stand with Israel. And then when the 2014 events, when you saw some of your Facebook friends are putting those annoying statuses of how they stand with Israel, and you have the celebrities, of course, standing with Israel, and then very few, but there's always a few celebrities that actually took stance pro-Palestine, and there was a lot of us in the truth community have a lot of our friends that are, of course, pro-Palestine. It's a select few celebrities, and it seems like that's another thing. That once you get onto the anti-Israel list in Hollywood, you get practically blacked out of doing anything. Like what happened to Javier Bardem, I think. He was pretty much put on a blacklist. Penelope Cruz, I know, was got into some hot water over their stance on the Israel-Palestine, which ultimately should be just called Israel. It's whether you support the Israeli false claim to the land or the legitimate Palestinians. It's not even a right to return, really. It's a right to take back what they are, what they have. That's theirs. It is not the Israelis. The Israelis showed up illegally, and it was given to them ultimately by the British government back in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, and it promised it to the Rothschilds. There was no mention about the biblical Jews or anything like that to people that the Christian Zionist, which it should be quotation Christian, because you can't be both. You can't fully uh, be a Christian and at the same time support Zionism, which Zionism over there in Israel, they treat Christians like dirt, or they definitely treat where they worship like dirt, and they graffiti their churches, and Christians are a lower status than Jews inside of Israel, and the white Jews are probably the highest. European Jews who founded the place are probably the highest, who are pro-Israeli government also, are the highest status of Israel. It's a very hierarchical system, and if you are one thing off, you fall into a lower class of society. Yeah, somebody who is black Israelis treated not that great. They are as right there, they have a big movement against the racism inside of Israel. There's a Black Lives Matter similar to Black Lives Matter. I guess it's not a great comparison, but it's a pro-black movement inside of Israel that's been building. I think it is called. It's affiliated with America's Black Lives Matter, which I saw some leader recently. Black Lives Matter denounced Israel. I was thinking, well, that's that they won't last too long. Probably now there's gonna be some serious media hate. This is where the media is really gonna turn the corner and going from just mild criticism to heavy disdain for Black Lives Matter after this incident, or they're going to just split into a group and make the main part of it, the part that doesn't talk about Israel, and the part that talks about Israel is going to be ostracized and forced to leave the group. That's what's going to happen. Anyways, I'm going to head over to the chat real quick. Tell me, hopefully we don't have the thing where it drops off real quick. Anyways, so Israel, they give tons of money to our politicians. They take them over on these propaganda tours as soon as they become congressmen, which it's a known fact that they do. And they bring these freshman congressmen over there to see the wonderful, peaceful country that they have. And only bring them to very select few places here and there and there. And ultimately, they see a very distorted, warped vision of Israel. And they think, oh, what a great place. I'll definitely be glad to take their money in the future. And they give huge sums of money because they are the biggest lobbyer inside the United States, bigger than even the NRA. People think the NRA is the biggest lobby. A lot of times I hear that false claim. It's ultimately Apex, the most powerful lobby inside the United States. I mean, they had their convention this year where they practically forced every politician that was running for president to speak there. Pretty much. And they had it in a basketball arena. I just got to the chat and read a little funny comment there. Oh yeah, shout out to Vince Easley, who is over there in the chat room. And thank you for tuning in to the show. Vince Easley, my former studio man. Might be coming back at a future date, but before I get off topic, so the Israeli lobby, they're the biggest, most powerful lobby inside this country, as I've reiterated many, many times. And it's not the people. I see ultimately the alternative media, you have people like Alex Jones and stuff like that that are they try to make it seem like the Muslim Brotherhood or the Saudis have ultimately they're the ones that are taking over the government. There's a Sharia takeover of the government, Sharia law takeover. They scare this Alex Jones fear porn that he puts on people. When we talk about the Muslims, pretty much just scaring people to pretty much he puts just a rewarded almost like Israeli propaganda. This is a common theme that they like the Israelis. It's kind of a flip. The Israelis don't see the Americans as the Americans see the Israelis, and the Israelis are very distrustful of Americans, and they believe that the Americans are going to turn on them at some point. And there's a lot of ideas inside of Israel that America is gonna they're gonna be taken over by the Muslims or whatnot. That there's a lot of people, which they're right. There's a lot of people when it comes to that the people might turn on them. A lot of people are waking up to realize how much of scumbags the Israeli government is, and at some point there could be a massive movement against our government for allowing this or being complicit in this 100%. I mean, it's not really an allowance; it's that it was completely in cahoots with them. And it's ridiculous. when you mention anything in this country against Israel to regular people, people start saying stuff like, "Oh, you better watch your back. Oh, you can't say that. You fucking anti-Semite," and all this other bullshit. And they ingrain this via years and years of brainwashing, via Operation Mockingbird, that you cannot talk about Israel, and that as soon as you talk about Israel, you're going to be alienated. You're going to be seen as crazy. You're going to be seen. You're going to be seen as a hateful, as a bigot, and it's wrong, to say the least. But people, it's like you get that sometimes, that blank stare back at you as soon as you start mentioning these things, and it's one topic that people know nothing about, and you bring it up, they have a hand in a lot of the topics that a lot of activists have, but there's some activists that don't like to touch that topic about their influence over this country, or the influence over all this stuff about the NSA. They have a hand in it with their tech experts, and you go to, and they were pioneers in a lot of the surveillance stuff before the United States. You go to other stuff, for example, the military-industrial complex. So a lot of the people inside that were pushing the military-industrial complex were political Zionists, and were heavily part of the reason the military-industrial complex was formed was pretty much for the United States to become become the military arm of the New World Order, and also to defend Israel's interests. You go to stuff like, of course, the most powerful people in this country. And, you have and they are the ones giving all these money to these politicians, the lobbying. The big lobbyers are AIPAC, and people don't even know that lobby exists. This is where pledges for war are announced. I mean, like I said, the infamous speech in 2011 or in 2007, where Hillary Clinton pretty much said she would bomb Iran, and pretty much pledged that when she became president. And now you see Hillary Clinton is up 15% up in the polls this stage election. It's become very evident that for sure Hillary Clinton will win this election, probably by a landslide in the end, even with not a lot of the percentage of the popular vote, nor the support of much of the people inside this country. She will still win. And I'm still sick that a lot of people, ultimately the Trump boogeyman tactic worked, because I think before, Hillary Clinton was such a unliked individual in this country, that or unliked to the point that they might have liked her in some regards. They saw she was a decent whatever, Secretary of State, whatever, but most people were like, no, there's no way we could have another Clinton in the White House. But now that mentality changed, and all of a sudden that this man that had been regarded as a creep and should never be allowed back in the White House, now Bill Clinton's going to be the first man, I guess that's what we're going to call it, once Hillary's in the White House. Now you can imagine what Bill Clinton's purpose is going to do. He's probably going to be sweet talking Americans, playing the saxophone or whatever, just being Mr. Cool Guy, telling that, supporting these horrible things. That's how you be cool like Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton, though, he doesn't look like he's got much energy left in him. He looks bad. Have you seen that picture? He looks like he doesn't got any blood going to his face. Well, I guess that's what happens when you lie for years and know all these lies, and yet you got to keep that stuff all pretty much hush-hush, or else you end up like Kennedy. Then that probably will age you pretty quickly. I mean, you see Barack Obama, he's also, any president, they age pretty quickly once they take office. And Barack Obama, went in looking pretty young, and now he's looking like an old man as he's going to return to wherever. I have this somewhat suspicion he's going to be going. He made a visit to Kenya last year. I have a feeling that he's going to be, maybe he's looking at going back to where his family is, but apparently his family doesn't even like, or I know his half-brother doesn't really like him. His grandma's like, oh yeah, he never comes to visit me or whatever. So I don't know how well that plan might work. Now we're going to have Hillary as a president just a few months, and after that, you can imagine it's going to be the war with Iran can't be too far away after that. Hillary as well. It's terrifying because she's a woman, 70 years old right now, or she'll be 70 soon, and she'll be. I mean, she has not much. There's not much to lose in her regard when it comes to. I don't think Hillary really cares whether she gets blown up in a nuclear war or not. I think she's crazy enough to press the red button. It's just like Netanyahu, that he's for sociopathic and ideologically fervent of his Zionism. Those are the Israeli leaders are such sociopaths. Part of the reason is that, why it's so scary that they have these sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies, because that they're not much for them to press the button. It's not like Putin or stuff like that. That has so much stuff that he does, so much hobby. There's a lot of stuff he's got going on. And a 30-year-old girlfriend. There's a lot of reasons for him not to die. I mean, these leaders, there's a little bit less reasons. They're definitely. I don't think they quite enjoy their daily life as much as Putin. Plus, Putin's not worried, or Putin's is not a part of. He opposes the banker elite. There's no one giving him orders. That's stuff how he pleases and how his people want it, not like the United States, where the president's getting orders ultimately from Mr. Rothschild at the end of the day. I think some presidents are a little bit more asleep at the wheel, like George Bush. I think Mr. Rothschild was just ultimately just telling him what to say, and that's about it. What to say and what to do, and he just did it. I don't think there was much of a discussion with George W. Bush. And we just remember all his little moments there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, George Bush, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, we're just going to remember these years for the United States, the years where the United States fell into martial law, the post 9/11 United States, where all of a sudden the people's attitudes went from, the government has no right to do that, this is a free country, to you have no right to do that, this isn't we have laws here. That's pretty much the people have become so subservient to the government at this point, and they don't question anything. They believe it's like if you question the government, you're a terrorist. And they've had these simple dichotomies. Like, you can't be, you're one or the other now. If you're not a Hillary supporter, you're a Trump supporter. Even though we have two other candidates that have over 5% or 5% or more support. But ultimately, are those candidates any good? That's a discussion for a different day. Talk regarding Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. I mean, I've seen that Gary Johnson is apparently also pro-Israel, which I know in the past I've said good stuff about Gary Johnson, but if that's true, then I'll retract everything, because if Gary Johnson is just ultimately owned by Israel, like all these other major candidates, that's very disturbing. And Jill Stein, I just take anything she says with some severe skepticism, because I just don't find it to be that genuine. Plus, I mean, I went to the Green Party page one time, and I see a big thing was Putin shown as a warmonger. And they're just pushing anti-Russia rhetoric. So, in my opinion, if you're going to oppose the biggest enemy to political Zionism on the planet, and at the same time oppose Putin has said that he'll work to make Palestine independent, and Iran, Syria, a lot of other countries say the same thing. They're not that big of militaries, and they're not big of they don't have a big leverage they can levy. Like when Russia brings that to the negotiating table, I think that Russia can get some serious things done when it comes to the Palestinian cause, because ultimately Palestine's leadership is corrupt, and they work with the Zionists when it comes to Abbas. It really seems to put a half-assed effort to any kind of work with. I mean, he's allowed all these tragedies to happen inside of Palestine during his leadership. I mean, he's been the leader for about 10 years, and they've already had the 08-09 conflict where they dropped white phosphorus on his people, and he didn't really do much to stop it or try to stop it. 2012, there was a bombing of Palestine. 2014, there was the horrible Operation Protective Edge, and now we have recent flare-ups, which possibly, who knows, we might be nearing a major flare-up in the Israeli-Palestine scenario. It certainly seems like it, that there could be another war or as it shouldn't be called a war, another part of the genocide that's been going on for many years. This Holocaust. 6 million Palestinians have died since 1948 as part of their Israel's supposed self-defense. Israel all the time says that, we're only 6 million Jews in a place of 2 billion Muslims. However, that Israel has influence over most of those 2 billion Muslims, or the governments that control most of those 2 billion Muslims. So their argument gets very mute. You actually bring up the simple thing to break up that, poor us. And that seems to be all. That's all their arguments are. Is that it's either that, or they even go back to the 70-year-old event of the Holocaust, which, I mean, you don't see. I don't know what you don't see. For example, the Chinese. We'll talk about the islands that they're disputed with Japan. You don't see the Chinese bringing up the what happened where they killed more of them, 10 million. 10 million. I mean, this is direct. And they bring it up to people that have no relation to the people that did that to the Jews. That a lot of them have no relation, or most of them have no relation to those people. And in fact, some of those people, mainly the Israeli government, actually have relations to the people who did it, because the Zionists and Israelis, or the Zionists and the Nazis, worked together during the pre-Israel stage. Just look up one of the major terrorist groups that founded the state of Israel was pro-Nazi. I think it was like the Lehi or something like that. I don't know. They have all these Hebrew names that are kind of hard to remember, and there was also the only political group that wasn't banned in Germany after 1933, besides the obvious Nazi Party, was the Zionist Federation in Germany. The Communist Party was banned. Every other party was banned. All these are just regular, just regular liberal parties and stuff like that were all banned. But the Zionist Federation in Germany was still around until 1937, and there was a transfer agreement that agreed to send Jews down to conquer Palestine, and they pay a little tax to the Germans. So the Zionists and the Nazis collaborated together. So they are bringing this argument up when a lot of them are connected to people that actually did the Holocaust, to people that didn't have no relationship to people who did the Holocaust. While you don't see China bringing up something from 70 years ago to the Japanese too much about actually the country that did these horrible things, and it was an event bigger than the Holocaust. 10 million people died during the Japanese massacres, or bigger than the Jewish part. The Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, 6 million. There was 11 million people killed in the Holocaust, but the Japanese who killed all those Chinese, that was 10 million of them, on all those brutal war crimes that they did during World War II. You don't see China bringing that up too much about these 70-year-old event in order to justify what they do when it comes to their, when it comes to Israel, their existence. Everybody says, if you deny Israel's right to exist, then I can't talk to you. You're a bigot if you deny Israel's right to exist. They try to make it seem like you are denying the people that live in Israel and their right to exist as people. And they even go as far as that, they try to make it seem like as a whole that you deny the right of Jewish people to be Jewish. No, it's the fact that you have no right to have taken over that land in 1948 that belonged to the Palestinians for hundreds of years before and was inhabited by the Palestinians, who a lot of those Palestinians are the very people that you claim to be, and that's why you claim to be able to come back there. It's just that a lot of those biblical Jews converted to Islam many years later, those descendants are the Palestinians that live there today. But no, you talk about the Zionists, want to come here on this claim that you're returning to your homeland, which you have no connection to because you guys are from Europe and you converted to Judaism in around the year 800 in Khazaria, when you were under conquest from the Christians and the Muslims, and your king decided, well, we'll just convert to Judaism, and then they can't mess with us because we will no longer be people that they want to convert. And Israel was formed afterwards. And you also, the true reason is because the British gave you this promise to your colonial expansionists like Thomas Herzl and all these original political Zionists that didn't even believe in Judaism and actually were just atheists, and they just believed that Jewish blood was superior. So ultimately, the people that claimed the land or the founders of the country were just racist, like the racists that you claim to be running from back in Nazi Germany. And you say that somehow that justifies taking land from a country that had no part in that. And the Palestinians are forced to leave. You kill a bunch of them during Nakba, but if you mention it nowadays, you're considered a racist. And they go, Zionist trolls go very hard to try to disprove that the Al-Nakba existed. But Al-Nakba did happen. And 1 million Palestinians were affected by either being forced to move or they were fucking killed by the IDF. And then later, after all this happened, the remaining Palestinians that stayed were pretty much forced to live in the shitter of the country, with little water, little food, and then eventually you wall them in, and now they're putting a second wall around them. And this is probably where Trump gets a little bit of his idea of, we'll talk about walls. It's probably his Zionist friends were talking about the walls over there in Palestine. I mean, I think, I don't know. It's some shit that, it's probably some sick shit that these, they drool over. I don't know what it is. It's like candy or something like that when they get to build a wall, these rich elite. And that's what they did. They just wall them in, and then they make them suffer in conditions worse than prisoners really anywhere in the world. It'd be kind of hard to find prisoners that are living in worse conditions than some of these Palestinians that are living in that house of horrors. Bombed, hungry, no houses. Yeah, and then if they do one thing wrong, or one thing against their rule book, many rules, I mean, you don't have to, they say, oh, you shot a rocket from your house, even though it wasn't from their house. It's a lie. They come in and tear down your house. And then if you're an American, as Americans, we don't even know who the hell Rachel Corrie was, and this is something that didn't even happen that long ago. USS Liberty, I mean, I guess in all fairness, it was 49 years ago, which I know in American time, that's like 149 years ago, because the Americans, stuff that happened not that long ago, it's like that. We treat it like with, it's like the JFK effect. People say, oh, that was a long time ago. Why do you care about it? Also understanding that there's an Israeli hand to it. But with the USS Liberty, yeah, people will say, oh, that happened in 1960. Well, okay, fair enough. We'll go to Rachel Corrie's end. 2003 only. So, I mean, Rachel Corrie, for people that are 25 or over, is easily rememberable event. Might even remember when it happened. But this brave American woman goes over there and was protesting the destruction of the Palestinian homes. And she stands in front of a bulldozer to block the bulldozer's path. And once the Israeli bulldozer guy he at the last second decides, okay, just stops the bulldozer. No. Like a fucking psychopath, he runs Rachel Corrie right over, runs over a young woman, 20 years old, right down, and she dies like a day later. And how's this event treated in Israel afterwards? Do they is there awkward silence about it? Do they say sorry? They regret the action. They realize that the driver, or they say that the driver made a mistake. No, they fucking celebrate this event. Like they celebrate Twin Towers, as I've seen before on the Purim. They celebrate the Twin Towers being attacked. Now I'm not 100% on that. It's unconfirmed all this, but I've seen that this has happened. That they celebrate the Twin. I know that the Israeli government has definitely. Benjamin Netanyahu says that he's glad the Twin Towers were attacked because it brought the United States much closer to Israel. It brought the American people, for sure, much closer to the blindly pro-Zionist side. That's for sure, where they don't question anything of Israel's actions. But I see pictures apparently with kids dressed up like the Twin Towers or stuff like that, and Mossad was all over that. Activists get in a lot of trouble when they start bringing up 9/11 as an inside job. You get in even more trouble, I think. Or maybe not more trouble, but you get into more obscurity, that's for sure, from the rest of the activist community when you bring up that the 60 Israelis were arrested shortly after 9/11, and they were shortly released afterwards, after they probably were debriefed. There was a van full of explosives with Israelis inside of it that was calling the George Washington Bridge. There was 5 dancing Israelis celebrating planes going into the Twin Towers. Donald Trump was talking about the celebrating Muslims in New Jersey during 9/11. But he didn't mention that was a lie. The truth was is that they were celebrating dancing Israelis, that's for sure, that were there to film the document the event. That's definitely true. And there's the Urban Moving Systems was an Israeli connected company that was all over the place that day with their vans. And there was one van, was the mural van, with a picture of the Twin Towers getting hit. So there was all kinds of these Israeli vans, Mossad vans, is documented proof, and it's it's definitely it's not really documented, but if you trace back by 911 calls and all that, so actually, yeah, that's documented, right? Yeah, they got the transcripts and everything. Now we're going to go back to chat room because I bet this is a buzz because it's been about 20 or so minutes since I went in there and saw what was going on, but I know that one. This kind of shows that really bring a bunch of people in. Yeah, there's the Purim photo somebody brought. John Keeler, thanks for bringing that photo. Yeah, that's the one I saw. I just didn't know how. I just didn't know how valid it was because I just saw that one picture. I was like, maybe they took it out of context or something like that. I didn't have any verification, so I wasn't sure. I mean, I haven't saw too much proof on that, but nothing really surprised me. Yeah, and they make pancake jokes about Rachel Corrie when she got bulldozed over by the Israeli bulldozer when she was protesting, and yeah, she don't post any pictures of her. I mean, respect to the person in chat room. Don't respect her. Don't post any pictures of her. I mean, to me, it's just ultimately very sad. And it's sad that very few Americans know who she is, Rachel Corrie. I mean, she was a very brave woman that gave her life, and there's been a few of them of Westerners that have been killed over there by Israel. And, there's very little knowledge of it, of what the Zionists did, and it's covered up. Imagine if the same event happened over in Iran, which probably wouldn't, because for example, I don't think that Iran would do anything that brutal like what they did to Rachel Corrie, run over a young woman that was blocking the house being bulldozed over. We'll just say, I don't know, some woman goes over there and protests that she believes there's bad conditions in their jails over there in Iran. She's in front of the entrance to the prison, and she gets ran over by an Iranian military van coming in. You know how much coverage there'd be? There'd be coverage for weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months and months. It'd be a tragedy that'd be talked about in textbooks for years and years and years afterwards. Be absolutely, that person name would be remembered like it would be remembered like some famous senator or something like that, or like MLK even. They might even make a postage stamp and everything with if somebody was ran over in Iran or something, that American, and it's a similar situation to Rachel Corrie. Yeah, with no glitches, it's a little bit surprising on UCY to have when I'm talking about this hard about the Zionists and having a show dedicated just to talk about the Israeli lobby in South America and how they whitewash and leave out big parts of our of important information. Americans should all, there's a group that what if Americanknew.com, and they start to cover that, and they've actually put billboards up across the country. This is probably the most powerful anti-Israel group in the country, and they're not very powerful at all. But, it's good that there's a group that's actually doing that, and I think that, I think that's definitely, if you're looking for a place, actually a legit something to donate to, that's people I donate to, because they actually are doing a good job, and they're actually showing accurate data, the staggering data that Americans need to see of these completely lopsided facts compared to what they've been telling us. That's the other way around, and then you look at the facts, it's 100% the other way around. And I'm just going to look back at the chat room and see if any got questions or anything like that. Going back, I see the mention about the $500 million. That's on the Georgia Guidestones. Actually, it was put up in 1980, and there's all these wild conspiracy theories about it, of course. And I think that it's simple as that somebody from the elite of the world probably put it up there, and some kind of it's definitely their guidelines for after the New World Order is created, which of course the political Zionists have a ton of collaboration with that. They're a big part of the New World Order, and that's another. Alex Jones doesn't put a lot of emphasis on that, does he? He talks about the New World Order, but he ultimately doesn't talk about the Zionist element of the New World Order, nor does he talk about at all the I blanked out there for a second. He doesn't talk about it at all. For example, Israeli involvement in 9/11, that kind of stuff. He leaves out major, and you see callers over time that have start bringing up these topics, and he automatically cuts them off. They have to go to commercial break. That kind of stuff starts happening. Calling to the Alex Jones show. Calling to InfoWars. I would like to just do that. A group of us from UCY will fucking spam a show one time. We'll just for one thing, I would like to see if it's actually true that you can actually get to his phone. Get on his call line without any screening or anything like that. Apparently, he doesn't screen his callers. That's one thing he brags about, is that he doesn't screen his callers, and all the calls that happen on there are 100% real. That's what he has. That's what he says. Now, do I believe it? Not too much. I believe that there's someone he's let through, and the ones that I've seen, ones that he's got really, I think there was one caller where that was or he discredited himself because he pretty much said, "Oh yeah, it went to as far as it goes." He talks about it was supposed to be somebody who's talking about Israel, but then he goes a little bit he tries to make people that talk about Israel seem like they all want genocide, because that's what he called for at the end. He says, "Oh yeah," because Alex Jones is like, "Oh, do you want the Jews to be done away with?" And he's like, yeah. And then he just hangs up on him. So I think that was a set-up call, probably by one of his friends or something like that, or somebody that works for Alex Jones to make people look like that. And yeah, $5 billion of our tax dollars. He doesn't mention too much about that when he talks about the corruption. And then he doesn't talk about Trump's connection to Zionism. It just pisses me off when the biggest name the alternative media for many years, and that's why people are probably partially deceived, is because Alex Jones misled them when it comes to Israel, and also the Christian Zionist community, that people will not separate. Also, I want to make something clear, is that you want to come preaching at me, come yelling at me about how this is going to happen to me. This is going to happen to me if I don't stand with Israel. I'm going to burn in hell. That kind of shit. I'm damned if I don't stand with Israel. But yet, you read the King James Bible that was established by a corrupt megalomaniac that was King James, who started the colonization of North America, or to the extent that there only had been a few expeditions by the British at that point. Or actually, there was no expedition. He started the first one. It set the path for the British genocide that they would do against the Native Americans. And then the next a few hundred years, they started the path for maybe one of the world's worst genocides ever, if not the world's worst genocide. mean, 100 million Native Americans were killed or displaced during the next few hundred years. And King James is the one that pretty much started it all. So I'm just saying to all those people that the blind and that people say, "Oh, it's the most accurate Bible." Says who? And they can't give you a real source. This guy said, "Oh, he's a Zionist Christian. Fuck him." I mean, I'm so sick of these Zionist Christians. That's the main thing, is that they perverting the religion, perverting the main religion in the United States, and turn it, and they made this idea that if you talk about the Israeli government, this is going to happen to religiously, and using that against the Americans that with their preachers. And that's what I'm saying. If we could go right to the core of a lot of the problems with Americans is Israel and their ideas of Israel, is that their preachers say to support Israel and Netanyahu and the Israeli government. We need to go to the churches, give the preachers the information. If they continue to spout out the lies that the Israeli government has put out, then we know whose side they're really on. Maybe some of them are just uninformed and learned everything wrong, and they can change. But I know a lot of them are probably not going to change, because they're ultimately just more assets of the Zionist lobby of America. It extends a little bit further, or the Zionist influence of America. The AIPAC is the lobby, and then influence controls, and then with the money and with the power, they control not just the politicians, media, the religion of this Hollywood. They have a lot of influence in all these things. Maybe they don't necessarily control these things, but they have a lot of influence in these things. In the military, industrial complex, they influence as well. Yeah, and this is I saw the picture right here. They talk about Corey pancakes. And there's Jewish. It says, let's see, a lot of memes, I guess, in the Zionist community of stuff like that. It was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have some Corey pancakes this morning. You know, it's like a lot of those people have that kind of mindset. Like they say quotes like, it's like the Apocalypse Now, where the guy says, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." That's where a lot of these people's mindsets are at. And they find it funny to have slogans on their T-shirts like 2 shots, 1 kill, and it's a picture of sniping a pregnant Arab woman. This kind of horrific shit that goes on in Israel really shows just ultimately to the core sociopathic, psychopathic society that. They watch Palestine get bombed from a hill like it's a movie, like it's a drive-in theater. I mean, I'm sure it's probably something they ask people to go to. It's like, oh, will you go watch the bombing of Palestine with me? And they're probably like, oh, sure. I'm sure that's the case there, that they've turned killing, murder, genocide in their society into stuff that's just like it's a movie, like it's like this is entertainment. The Palestinians, they've dehumanized. They've dehumanized the Palestinians. They've dehumanized practically the rest of the world because the Talmud says so. And the Talmud says that people, non-Jews or Goyim, are just to serve them, the Jews. Which not all Jews believe the Talmud, because some Jews are smart enough and awake enough to realize how insane the Talmud is, and that the fact that the Talmud was a reaction book, more or less, to the Bible by pretty much the Pharisees to denounce Jesus, and the Talmud was kind of just to quell the Jews to going over to the growing religion of Christianity. That's where it started, and it's been used recent times in the last 100 years in the Zionist movement, and it's not really, for some of them, a religious book. More or less, it's mostly a book on morality, or the lack of morality that they encompass, and the lack of empathy that they should have, and this ultimately it's pretty much just a similar book to like Mein Kampf was the Nazism, is similar to what the Talmud is to Zionism. It's a book that claims racial superiority, and it has it's really probably the level of sadistic level of the Talmud probably trumps anything that you'll find in Mein Kampf or Nazi literature, just because of the fact of how dark and twisted some of this shit is. You read about, talk about what they believe of what the Christians are, and what it mentions, or it says Mary is it's what it says about Mary and Jesus in the book. I mean, I think that's all we need to tell a lot of the Christian, the Zionist community of America. Just read what the Talmud says, but they'd probably be in disbelief and we just wouldn't believe it. What they would say that we're giving them a doctored version or something like that, because a lot of them just have this strong cognitive dissonance that won't allow them to accept things how they are and accept the reality of what they're dealing with. And I'm looking at the comments right now. I'm seeing what's going on. It says that, yeah, and there was some people in America had been, the stuff that Americans took out of the story, for example, is Rachel Corrie, and that's what's saying is that they use these false patriots in our media, and they use the false patriot, the supposed patriot movement in this country to denounce people like Rachel Corrie, because they say stuff like, oh, well, she burned the American flag, so she hates America. And she's probably one of the terrorists and stuff like that. And it's like, so? She burned the American flag. Is the American flag more sacred than a human life? Is the American flag, is that how you consider it this magical piece of cloth that cannot be burned for whatever reason? Anyways, isn't it if it falls on the ground, you can fucking burn it? You're supposed to fucking burn it? I mean, it's weird. There's all this all these flag rules or whatever. And, it's like, is it more important that piece of cloth got burned than the fact that Rachel Corrie got turned into a pancake by an Israeli bulldozer, the man that was sociopathic enough to do it because she was trying to stop these Palestinians' home from being destroyed, and that at the end of the day, parents and a family lost a great daughter, a brave daughter, and a beautiful young lady inside and out, because a piece of cloth got burnt. It's okay that the Israelis did this. And Caterpillar is connected heavily to the other ones. The Israelis use Caterpillar. That's the one that the Israeli bulldozers that tear down all the houses are, and they're made inside the United States. So, I mean, if you're in construction, that's another thing to keep in mind. Maybe you should go to another company next time that, or if you have any kind of say in that, or you do your own little thing, or you're going to rent out one, maybe you should consider using a different company next time. I always talk about boycotting, and I always say that I don't care that there's laws and stuff like that against it. I call for a boycott on my radio station, on Voice Rebellion Radio, to boycott Israel, because Israel is a criminal terrorist state, and we shouldn't be giving our money to them, to companies that are over there. They say left and right, and I see what they've done on the internet, and it's sad that you even see, like, for example, these atheist pages have been bought out, or not really bought out, but they're now controlled by what seems to be Zionist trolls, because they try to make it seem like that the Zionists are just protect themselves from the crazy Muslims, and that you're irrational, and you're like one of those religious Bundys if you oppose Israel and you support BDS. Boycott, boycott, divestments, and sanctions. Which, of course, I support BDS. And, that's why it's what has ultimately happened is like the new atheism on the internet. These people are getting they don't even know, they're not even getting paid for their service to Zionism. Like some Israeli trolls actually get paid. They're becoming unwittingly Zionist trolls. And if people will say, "Oh, that's just because you're not an atheist, dude, because you believe in God." But because you believe in God, you're against what we have to say. No, I'm against what you have to say because just spouting out ultimately the horse shit that comes out of religious fundamentalists that you claim to hate. That's what the Zionists are. These people are their whole society is surrounds a pseudo religion that is Zionism. It's not really, it's not Judaism. It's a twisted off of Judaism, and it takes this. There's this ideas of racial superiority. This ideas of that people that belong to it are superior divine beings. I mean, this is not even crazy stuff. This is to say that they believe this. This is what Mehmet Begin, their former prime minister, said back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, he was the prime minister. And you see Jews actually, sometimes they have protests and they actually burn the flag of Israel. And they'll still go far enough to say, I mean, it's funny because then the media's like, oh, they're anti-Jewish. They're Jewish, but they're anti-Jewish. You know, they start spouting out stuff that doesn't make sense. Then the term self-hate Jew comes about. Any Jew doesn't support the state of Israel, they must hate themselves because they don't support what these guys are doing. Now, this doesn't exist for, this doesn't exist in other religious communities. You wouldn't say for Muslims when it would be like the equivalent of actually believing when, for example, an ISIS says that Muslims that don't support them are just fake Muslims. It'd be like the equivalent of this vast amount of people actually believing that. And that's what's happened when Israel was start connecting with Judaism. Anybody that is not supportive of Israel, that's Jewish, must hate themselves. So this is to all the people, because I have a few people that I know personally that have their grandfather, their father, stuff like that, or they might even be Jewish themselves. Realize I'm not excluding you. I'm not against you. You could be as well, and you have as much reason to be anti-Zionist just like us. And as well, just remember they're doing this in the name of your religion. So you have a lot of initiative to go and fight this. And there's also this rhetoric also that those who hate Zionists must hate Christians. That's what people actually believe. That's why part of the reason that this is a rhetoric, or that if you hate Israel, or heavily dislike Israel, you must hate the United States. You hate Americans. You hate baseball. He goes on and further. Like we're so two and two connected. Or one country and one country connected. And it's funny that ultimately, when it comes to who we have more, and when we have this rhetoric against Russia right now, but ultimately, what two countries have more history together? Israel and the United States. They did. We've had this relationship where the United States gives $5 billion tax dollars a year to them. Or we have Russia. I mean, Russia has been. There was 2 world wars where Russia and the United States were on the same side, and the people had to fight on those 2 horrible wars together. Ultimately, the Russian people and the American people have quite a bit in common. A lot in common. They're both majority Christian. They both like a lot of the same things. Russians like rock and roll, and now Americans like rap, but they have a lot more in common, the Russian American people. Well, the American people, and the Israeli people probably wouldn't find too much in common with if Americans and Israelis met en masse together. Because Israeli people, for one, they see Americans as lower. And Americans have believed all this time that the Israelis see us back with that same friendship. But they don't see it as the same friendship. They see it as useful idiots, the Americans that have fallen asleep to their Zionist lies. funny when you look at the chat room. It starts getting ultimately they'll get 3 people put a lot of comments in there. But it's great is that a lot of the time I talk about Israel, most of the people usually have about the same opinion. It's good to see that everybody's awake in the chat room, knows what's going on. I'd say the people that listen to the show on a regular basis, start inviting your friends out onto the show. If you can. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of things like you can't really talk about your radio career, talk about your stuff you like on the radio because you got jobs. A lot of the people you got or people at work or whatever. And you can't really talk about this kind of stuff. You have to keep this on the low, key for a while. But people that you actually can talk about the stuff with, definitely share the show to them. And people are mentioning it. Otto's are the resident comedian of the chat room. I guess that's one way you could describe him. He's always got the funny comments. And that's why I say participate in the chat room because for now that's the best thing. It's the second best thing to a call line, which we don't have for a little bit more. But the chat room is always good to participate, and I like to interact with it a little bit. Definitely because it's kind of hard. I mean, 2 hours. And especially we just talk about mainly one country, talk a little bit about the U.S. government, but it's a lot of time to fill. It's a lot of content to put. But if the chat room a little bit of help from the chat room, definitely puts a little bit more content in the show. 2 hours, I don't have a co-host, so it's 2 hours of just me talking. But it's not just when it comes to all this facts. This is stuff that is widely known in other places and widely known by many. I mean, many people said it. It's like, was Israel supported ISIS? People say it's a crazy conspiracy theory, but they won't listen to all the major leaders and stuff that have said that Israel does just that. I mean, it's like who else has got? It's like the Iranian general. An Iranian general said it. One of Putin's aides said it. We've had Fidel Castro himself said it. We've had, I'm pretty sure Nicolas Maduro said it. You have all these people overseas, world leaders and stuff like that, but nobody believes them. Because, they're just American-hating leaders or whatever. I mean, and Putin has said a lot when it comes to this kind of topics and New World Order. He pretty much called out the New World Order and his way of doing it with intellectual speak that a lot of Americans would not really get what he's saying. But it's like, what else does he have to put it in such simple terms for Americans to actually get what he's saying? And when would they actually start to believe him? I think Putin would be a great leader to actually say it out loud, but I feel like if he said it out loud and said it where Americans could actually understand what he's saying, he'd be in very, 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 very serious danger. I mean, even more than he is now, possibly. I mean, they would, if he actually, because that's one world leader overseas. I think a lot of Americans actually listen to somewhat, especially in recent years as Obama. A lot of Americans, a lot of conservative Americans have started looking to Putin as somewhat of a somewhat of an example of what they believe a leader should look like. Unfortunately, a lot of the same people believe that Trump would make a great leader, which they don't realize that Trump is connected heavily with the Zionists, just like Hillary Clinton is. And there's really, that's how it always is. You got 2 nominees that are pro-Israel. I mean, any congressman that gets to the point of Congress has to pretty much pledge his allegiance to Israel once he gets to that level. So now you see it's not too easy to get anywhere without first announcing your support for Israel and political Zionism and all that shit. It's shit. It's racial superiority. It's genocide. It's murder. It's propaganda. It's robbery. It's criminal. Many words describe Zionism, definitely, and the ideology that it is. People realize that also with that what the Israelis are bombing Palestine with are F-15s, American fighter jets, and they're killing Palestinians with this, and they bomb them in their heavily populated population center that is Gaza City. Gaza has become an absolute house of horrors, and there's nowhere for them to go because Egypt, a lot of times, just closes up the tunnels for them that they're escaping in, and the only other place for them to go is into the ocean because the rest of it is Israel. And people wonder what Saudi Arabia's relationship with all of it, and Saudi Arabia 100% with Israel, and the United States, the dirty trio. And Saudi Arabia actually has islands occupied by Israel that they claim, or that's theirs. But they do nothing about it because they don't want to challenge Israel on it. I mean, it's what was theirs or stuff like that. Still, really, they have the claim it was theirs, but they don't do anything about it. They don't try to take back these islands because ultimately they have a very good relationship with Israel, just like Turkey. Erdogan, people talk about, or people thought that Erdogan was some kind of anti-Zionist or whatever, but he's one of the top 10 traitors. Turkey's one of the top 10 traitors with Israel under Erdogan in the last 18 years. It's the same way with Qatar, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, all those countries. They might say for a second that they're pro-Palestinian, but then they do something that's 100% anti-Palestinian. So the only ones that ultimately in the Middle East actually oppose political Zionism is Syria, Iran, and Yemen. And people, I started a little comment about a lot of people started talking about Putin and his relationship with with Israel and whatnot. But I think that it is I think it's no secret that there's a lot of tension definitely with Netanyahu and Putin, but ultimately I think Netanyahu he'd be too scared to actually provoke anything with Russia, unlike with Iran or Syria. And ultimately with Iran, I think Netanyahu's too scared to go in there into Iran by himself. That's why he's going to force Israel or force the United States into it, because Iran to them is too much of a threat. In Russia, forget about it. They are way too. Russia would crush Israel, the Israeli military, if alone. But in the United States military, still, probably a lot of war analysts have said that as long as nukes are not used, there's no winner. In conventional warfare, Russia would defeat the United States. So, of course, Netanyahu's going to take that with a lot of caution. And that's why you don't see Netanyahu, for example, calling for the same kind of stuff that he calls for with Iran and Syria. Netanyahu as well, I think that he tries to he's trying to his plans are right now looking at Iran and Syria and eliminate them first, and that's two of Russia's major allies, where also one of those countries Russia has a base with, and both those countries are pretty big gas suppliers of Russia. Putin has done some very major moves. I mean, by protecting Iran and protecting Syria, has been a major block in the Zionist plan, and also by pretty much by also having the alliance with the South American countries, few of whom were made some very strong anti-Zionist policies. He did help them out there. So, and sorry about that. My audio just died for a few seconds there. I mean, it was bound to happen today, but I'm back, and anyone that just tuned in to Voice of Rebellion Radio, we are talking about the Israel lobby and its influence over the United States. Host Chris J here on the. Sorry, we don't got the call lines working. Participate by the www.ucytv chat if you want to participate in this show. Just remember that the Israeli nuclear program exists, though, and that's another thing that they keep Americans in the dark. That they have 411 nuclear weapons that they can use, and I mean, this is a country with 6 million people. So, I mean, we've probably looked at like nuclear weapon to population ratio. They might be at the highest in the world. They have more nuclear weapons than Pakistan, which is the only other country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. And those nuclear weapons were given to them by the United States when they had the fascist dictatorship way back. They have nuclear weapons. Iran, I mean, they've been saying that Iran's been going to get nuclear weapons in 6 months for 25 years now, and it hasn't happened yet. And this fear just keeps going and keeps going. They keep trying to scare Americans of the fictional Iranian nuclear weapons program. And ultimately, in the situation they are, who would even blame them if they actually decide to have a few of them? I don't think they do have any nuclear weapons. Because ultimately the nuclear deterrent might be the only thing that would save them from actually getting invaded by Israel or the United States or both countries. So that's probably what's going to happen, is that if the invasion does happen of Iran, both countries are going in. Israel's going in, and the United States is backing them up with a lot more people. Iran's nuclear weapon program has been something that Netanyahu scared Americans of for years and years and years, and even at the one time at the UN, bringing up the cartoonish picture of the bomb and saying that this is the stage they're at, this is the stage they're going to be at, and that once they get nuclear weapons, the Ayatollah is going to kill all of you and kill us too. If you don't do it, all of us are going to die or whatever. And I think the name of their leader, they'll talk about their president too much. They don't say like, oh yeah, I don't think they said too much. Like Ahmadinejad. A lot of times it just said Ahmadinejad, not President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Make it, and then the Ayatollah. It sounds scary because Americans don't even know what the Ayatollah is. They're like, well, that sounds scary. That sounds like some kind of supervillain or something like that. It's an Islamic supervillain. Hey, everybody, the Islamic supervillain's going to nuke us. And then you gotta after that, Captain America is going to come in and save the day. That's what America. That's what Americans think that the whole. That's what it sounds like to them. They hear the Ayatollah come in. It sounds a little bit better than when they just call it the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah cut off the gas. The Ayatollah is going to nuke us. Blame the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah this. They just go on and on about Fox News or whatever about the Iranian nuke deal or whatever that they signed, with the United States signed, which talk about $400 million. It went way back for years, but let's see. I'm looking at the comments. What's going on right now? And if I'm alive now. Okay, cool. Just wanted to see what's going on because it was really buzzing. It sounded like people were still scaring about the. Still talk about the audio going off, and yeah, that's what totally what tonight's show was: bigoted hate speech, full of racism and oppression, the no tolerance and offensive triggering. Well, what's that really long comment? Does somebody have that long comment? Because I would like to read that out loud. And the one with I'm a blah 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 that identifies as blah 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 blah, and he goes on and on and on, and it's like, and if you disagree with me, you're a blah 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 blah. I totally already. That's someone put on there. Yeah, okay, the audio is all good. Yeah, definitely. I've triggered some people. I've triggered. People with my hate speech that I'm apparently spouting out. And yeah, there's probably some people that would probably say that this is hate speech or that I'm inciting hate on my show. And hopefully that's not too much the case because they can get you in some serious trouble. Well, nowadays it's a touchy subject of Zionism. You really can't talk about the Zionists inside this country. And if you do talk about the Zionists, well, it really sets you up for they're really out to get you after that point. It's our fascist government right now here in the United States, and set for Hillary Clinton being the president, and probably not too far away from martial law. I mean, they had that big exercise last year, Jade Helm 15, where there was across the country all these preparations for a martial law scenario, and people just didn't even seem to care too much. We had quite a few stuff happen. It seemed like a big leap forward, like the preparations that happened last year. Now they're just ready for whenever to enact it. And it could happen next year, and they're going to definitely wait for the Hillary Clinton administration to officially start, and probably might wait until when they actually initiate the whatever plan to start the war with Iran. They could do another false flag because it was predicted by two pretty important people that have been predicted by a false flag would happen in the United States. Well, what they said is that a major attack would happen. Netanyahu said that he predicts an attack happen in New York in 3 to 4 years. Not if or this happened, just said that in 3 to 4 years. Back in 2013, he said that. Cheney prognosticated, and he also prognosticated, as I read in the article, prognosticated 9/11 in the spring before it happened. He prognosticated an event bigger than 9/11 happening soon. So it's definitely something to keep your eye on. Is any possibly a false flag in just a few years? And Another one. On behalf of all 62 genders, I'm getting offended. No, you got. I'm sorry that I didn't acknowledge that you're a cappuccino. I saw one like that. It's that you're a cappuccino mocha popcorn zucchini that identifies as a. I just kept going on as a PlayStation PC that, or what was the last one? And oh yeah, it uses the pronouns her. And yeah, but continuing on the show about the Zionism. I mean, it seems like you could just go on and on and on about it. I mean, I've done quite a few shows. I mean, I've done a few shows dedicated just purely to the state of it, talk about Israel and what I've learned. I know there's a lot more to learn about all of it and all their culture, the sick society that they live in, the filth that their society is, and what it completely entails. And I mean, it's gone like what under the false patriots and the whole America crowd, what it's like over here in the United States. What in the United States is a similar event happened over here, but our people are getting completely dumbed down and are it's becoming more subservient and conforming. So but this end over here in the United States, this is the serving end. Us Americans, we're supposed to be serving them, the Israelis, and us Goyim, as they call it, as what they see us. What people don't know what Goyim are. Goyim is cattle. That's what it means in Hebrew. So that's what they see of us, the Zionists. They see of us, some regular Americans, as Goyim, and Gentile's like the nice word. That's like calling someone, Gentile would be like the equivalent of just colored or something like that. Goyim's like pretty much like the N word. I mean, that's what it'd be probably like equivalent, of how severe of a war, how offensive we should take it. It's a pretty offensive word. I mean, ultimately, it's dehumanizing. Like the N word is to black people is like what Goyim is to the rest of us. All of us that are not Jewish, when they direct to us, and then they have their own, which is called self-hating. A self-hating Jew, which I mean, I don't know what the equivalent would be in the past of that word, but it's like, it'd be like calling, because they actually don't agree with the psychopathic ideology of Zionism. They must hate themselves. I guess that could be called. I mean, that's pretty much what they would almost would say back in the day during times of segregation here in the United States. They would say, "Oh, you must just hate being white or whatever if we're opposed to segregation." And over there in Israel, they have Jim Crow style segregation as well, where Israelis have their own roads and Arabs have their own roads, and they also helped a lot the South African apartheid regime. The South African apartheid regime only had about one open ally, and the United States is also. I mean, there was really two open allies: the United States and Israel. That was it. Besides that, most of the world they might have secret relations with South Africa during the apartheid era, but they definitely didn't have open relations with South Africa during that period of time. I mean, a lot of the world opposed them, just absolutely abhorred them, while Israel and the United States helped them quite a bit. And also, Israel was very influential. And a lot of people don't know that South Africa during this time had nuclear weapons. And South Africa's nuclear weapon program was helped by the illegal and rather recent. It's only been about 20 years after they developed their own nuclear weapons, they helped South Africa develop nuclear weapons, and they were successful. South Africa had 10 nuclear weapons at their most, I think, which is nothing like the Israelis' 411 that they have, and probably building. It's probably, who knows, it could be up to 700 or something like that by now. But still, even at 411, that's enough to take out pretty much every major city on the planet at a push of a button. And you know that the sociopathic, psychopathic leadership of Israel is very willing and crazy enough to do it, because they probably just believe that they're fulfilling prophecy, rather that they are doing an action that would kill millions of people, billions of people in a flash. That the Israelis have a completely the Israeli government is completely is completely full of hate, full of and full of religious fervor. And yet, a lot of liberals that in this country that claim to be against these kind of things, and there's also these are wealthy elite that profit off of arms deal, a lot of them too, that are heavily connected in the Zionist circle. All things that liberals claim to hate, but they support this. So, you know, you heard quite a bit probably if you talking with if you talk to hardcore Democrats or whatever, they talk about how Israel heavily influences the DNC, heavily influences Hillary Clinton. They probably would say, "Oh, what's wrong with that? You're just being a bigot or whatnot." And but ultimately, Israel is everything that the Israeli government, everything that they claim to hate. So it's kind of odd to see the hypocrisy with all that. And the American left, or the pseudo-American left, a lot of them became that way. Bernie Sanders, we saw a lot of that, is that a lot of people said so, or just thought of it a non-issue. When you start talking about the American relationship with Israel, and that Bernie Sanders pretty much agreed with continuing America's toxic relationship with Israel. And Bernie Sanders pretty much didn't differ from most of the people on foreign policy, and had pretty much the exact same opinions on stuff like Syria and whatnot. I read today that one they also talk about on the other side. Then you have these and this goes into the alternative media, the supposed alternative media like WorldNet News or World News Daily or whatever, WND.com. That I see a lot of times used by a little bit more of the right wing sector of the alternative media community. WND.com was actually founded by one of the people that did helped do one of the major actions that the Zionists wanted to be done, which is the destruction, destabilization of Syria. And it's not totally done. Right now it's more of a project in progress. But he's actually, the person that controls WND worked with Lebanon, was a U.S. Lebanon bi-party collaborator. The guy, he worked in, I think, maybe their embassy or something. I don't think it was the embassy though. I think it was like one of their military partnerships or something like that, which planned ahead the war in Syria and the destabilization and the use of mercenaries and the use of terrorism to destabilize Syria from within. And yeah, so the Israeli highways are segregated as well. What I just read, and there's Israeli only lanes. I saw that as well, but with people walking, apparently they can't walk together. But they have Israeli only. Israeli. Oh yeah, now I remember. I remember actually reading about it like really about a year ago. I remember reading stuff about that a year or two ago, seeing signs about that, but I forgot that about actually happening. Now, I just remember seeing the pictures of the roads being segregated, and they can't walk together. And the Israeli government pretty much enforces the non-collaboration or non-friendship between the two. And that formerly existed is that before the Jews and the Arabs used to have, they used to even watch over each other's kids and stuff like that back in before 1948. But then the state of Israel came about, and the Jews and the Arabs were split apart.
and then the Jewish community inside of Palestine, now occupied by Israel, became more and more fervently the ones that stayed anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, and then eventually they took on the sick new identity that is Zionism. And they became the citizens of Israel. People. They didn't always used to be the people that lived in Palestine. Didn't always used to be this hatred between Jews and Arabs, and between Muslims and Christians, or Muslims and Jews inside the country. And at that time, there was also a lot of Christian community. And inside of Palestine is actually one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Palestine, and Palestine was the country that existed there at the time of Jesus' birth. Palestine is very central to the Bible, yet a lot of Christians have never even heard of Palestine. And they haven't heard a lot of also the history later that Palestine existed for hundreds of years prior to the formation of Israel. And it was kind of like I think it was somewhat of an autonomous territory, something like that, under the Ottoman Empire, which controlled it prior to the War I and before the Balfour Declaration, before the British took it over. The Ottoman Empire was there. And in 1905, actually, and this is kind of interesting, that probably looking ahead of what happened later in the leading up to the Balfour Declaration, very early on in the whole Zionist project, that you could say. The Zionists had really just became an ideology in the last 30 to 40 years prior to this. In 1905, the Zionists decided that they would try to buy these little slice of land, as they saw it, for $150 million. But the Ottomans said, I don't care how much money you give to me, even if it's in gold and silver, that no matter how much money you give to me, I can't do this because Allah would never forgive me. And he really struck his principles, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. And because this is probably a heavily enraged Zionist that wanted to buy the slice of Palestine, slice of land that was Palestine at the time. And then it just seems like, coincidentally, a war happens that the Ottoman Empire falls apart in. 16 years later, the Ottoman Empire completely falls apart, and the British take it over as part of the British Mandate of Palestine, who they are already, before the war had even ended, had already promised it to the Rothschilds via the Balfour Declaration in 1917. So it's all too coincidentally, it then lands into the British hands, and that sets the stage. In 1917, they were already done, or 1921, once the Ottoman Empire fell apart, it was already done and sealed. The deal was sealed at that point, that it would eventually become Israel. And there was a war for independence, as what the Israelis dubbed it, to try to make it seem like they were fighting, that the British actually legit to make it hide the British collaboration, the whole event, try to make it seem like it was like a spontaneous revolution, a spontaneous event, that the creation of Israel happened, not a long-term plan that was coming to fruition. So they call it the War of Independence. It was more like really just the war of the Palestinians trying to keep their land. Ultimately it was a coup, you could call it. It was a hostile takeover, but it was the Palestinians trying to retain their land and trying to stop this from happening, and the Israelis trying to push it forward. And at these points were just called terrorist groups, and they called them openly terrorist groups, and they did major events, or they did one major event to really push it forward, which was the King David Hotel bombing, where they killed a ton of British people and didn't even apologize for the British that died. They only apologized for the Jews that had died in the building. And they dressed up as Arabs and blew it up. And doesn't that sound like much like the MO? And you think of 9/11 and many other events. It all makes sense, doesn't it? That Patti Monsanto, the musician, mentions it in one of his songs, I think, the King David Hotel bombing, which it had killed it killed over 100 people. It was a major terrorist attack. And this happened in 1946. 1947, there was the UN mandate, and then 1948, you have the official recognition by the United States, and quickly after the Soviet Union of Israel. And there you have it. That's how the theft of Palestine took place. I mean, it went from pretty much just an obscure idea just 75 years prior to actually happening in 1948. And after 43 years after their failed plan to try to buy it from the Sultan, who didn't allow it. And that's why I think Turkey, that's why they try so hard to make sure that Turkey stays under NATO control and stays under Erdogan's control. And that's why Erdogan fights so hard to stay in power. I think is because Erdogan's part of a plan, and that they don't want Turkey possibly returning back to the days of the Ottoman Empire. And also, to all those people, a lot of people say the Ottoman Empire was complicit in genocide and the Armenian genocide, which is true. The Armenian genocide definitely did happen, but it was a different story. It did not happen. The Ottoman Empire, the Sultan didn't do it. The Sultan Mehmed, I think was the guy's name. I'm not exactly now that kind of forgot the name of the Sultan during World War I, but it was actually the person ultimately who was actually responsible was a group named the Young Turks, or some people call them the Donme, which Young Turks, just like the name of the Senghor's show, not so coincidentally, but this group was a group that fought fought against the Ottoman Empire, not so coincidentally, and at the same time repressed the Christian community in Armenia. They're pretty much, what you could say is like they were the modern day version, or not modern day version. They were the modern day version that would be similar to like the Syrian rebels. These were like the Turkish rebels that repress minorities and at the same time fight against a government that is not liked by the West or whatever players involved, the Zionists of then, now the Zionist state, since they actually have a country that they are inhabit the government of. So they were more of like a rebel group. And this rebel group was the ones responsible for the Armenian genocide, and they ultimately just kind of helped serve the Allies' purpose there, the British, who were one of the major fighters against the Ottoman Empire. Then once the Sultan was gone, then they were able to bring about, all of a sudden the space is cleared, and then Britain took it over. And at that point, it was essentially now on the path to be a major part in the plan to make it Israel had been fulfilled. So now you see maybe the true reasons of World War I, and definitely the reason why the war with the Ottoman Empire happened. And that part of World War I was a lot different than what was in the textbooks. Of course, it was Lusitania happening, where the fact that what was actually happening was the boat was bringing back arms to back to Britain and to the Allies. This is before the United States actually got involved in the war, and they admitted there were small pistols or small arms on board, pistols, which is already bad enough if they're bringing that to the Allies. I mean, talk about the German motive and why the Germans would have to torpedo the boat. And they even gave a warning to all the passengers that if they got on that boat, they would be in danger. They knew that they were going into danger and that the German subs, they knew where all the German subs were, because the Navy or the British military had already cracked the German Enigma, or the German code of the time. And who was controlling the Navy at that point? Or was a high-level Navy commander, Winston Churchill, not so coincidentally. And then they torpedoed the boat, and there was actually heard to be explosions that made the boat sink really quickly. I mean, why did this boat sink in like 2 minutes? Because there were bombs on board, and there were bombs that were heading over to Germany. To fight Germany over to Britain. So it's just one more major lie. And this is really the Great War. War I had maybe a more impact on geopolitics and how the world would look for the next 100, all the way up to today, than maybe World War II had, despite War I not having maybe as many fatalities and maybe as many people, as many people inflicted by the direct path of the war. it still probably had, it might have had more, influence on what would happen over the next years. Apparently, somebody left over there in the chat room. I see the RachelCorey.com foundation. You can check that page out. RachelCoreyFoundation.org, and then. But apparently, they haven't updated the page in over a year, so that's interesting, definitely. And people talk about Israel being a terrorist state. Well, it was created by 3 different terrorist groups that created the IDF. They openly called themselves terrorist groups. So it's no surprise that the country that resulted off of it became a terrorist state. And it's the same old stuff they've done for years and years and years. They do to this day. The same kind of like what I said is that this thing that they do in Syria was the Syrian rebels. They did was the Turkish 100 years ago, and the Ottoman Empire. Bring about the part of the Ottoman Empire was also similar in another regard, as I've been seeing a little bit and read a little bit about. Is the Ottoman Empire was actually not an Islamic state like a lot of people think it was. Actually, the Ottoman Empire was more of a secular type state that had a lot of dignity and treated religious minorities pretty well, similar to like Assad is. And how the country was prior to the Civil War is like what the Ottoman Empire was back then. It was much advanced also, and also accepted science and reason in their country. It was not backwards. It was actually a very progressive community. And that's how also that's as well Germany was over there, where they didn't have... They didn't treat I don't think they treated their colonies nearly as bad as France and Britain did. And they actually had African allies. Britain and France had no African allies. They just had colonies that they controlled. So relatively Germany was more advanced. And Austria-Hungary was known for its, and Vienna was known for its neutrality and allowed people of many different schools of thoughts into the country in a very artistic society that the Austro-Hungarians were. So War One, it goes back to it, and the Zionists had a hand in War One as well. But what happened in War One? The lies are pretty important that they told us about. That it was quite, especially when it comes to the Ottoman part of the war, that the Armenian genocide didn't happen quite the way that's been told to us. And it's funny that, when you look at the Zionist organizations, like the ADL, the Armenian genocide is not even recognized as an actual genocide. And that's because a lot of the people in the Armenian genocide were not even the deal was that they were similar to what the Syrian ISIS in Syria and the Syrian rebels are, is that a lot of times you see, there's this picture with terrorists in Syria and they're one's wearing a Star of David, because they're not actually even from the area, and they're from Israel. That was a similar deal, is that these Dhammen were actually Jews that were pretending to be Islamists in order to court people over or to their side. They employed this Islamic rhetoric to get these people, gullible people, into their movement, and that's what formed the Dhammen or the Young Turks. So just saying that the same old tactics, they repeat and repeat and repeat until we wake up to them, and then maybe alter it a little bit, or maybe just expand it and find another tactic of doing their dirty deeds. But that's one example of them doing just that. They repeated the same old shenanigans. But I think shenanigans is such a light term for what this is. Crimes, war, genocide, and much more that the Zionists and United States government. This is also World War I was the time of the United States had been recently acquired by the elite, by the Federal Reserve, and then that's why the United States got involved in this war, that they had no part in over there in Europe, and that they fell the false flag that they used, the Lusitania, to get the people behind it. and the supposed Zimmerman telegram. Remember that's what they tell us, that there was supposedly the Germany had sent a telegram to Mexico say that they wanted Mexico to invade the United States. That's what they tell us in the textbooks. Which it is true that the Germans wanted to seek a collaboration with Mexico. It comes in question whether how far they actually wanted to go with that. And they actually, I think Germany they thought a little bit of a relationship within the German or Mexican revolutionaries, such as Zapatistas. So they had somewhat of a cordial relationship, but it wasn't of too much. It was, they just looked for a strategic partner in the region, and the Lusitania was complete horseshit, like I just outlined it. And there's the ultimate myth that should be said, that people think that Palestine, when Palestine existed, it was just or it never existed. But with Palestine, before Israel existed, it was just desert. It was just a blank slate practically. But the truth is that it was a lot more than that. It had a very vibrant history and it was a beautiful country. But the Zionists try to make it seem like it was just desert and it was just some nomadic people or something like that walking around the desert. There were cities. Jerusalem was a vibrant city. 100 years ago, Jerusalem was there. And hundreds of years ago, Jerusalem was there. And there was quite a few cities inside of Palestine. There was flights to Palestine. It was encouraged tourism to Palestine. Palestine existed. Palestine still exists. It's who actually is supposed to be there. Israel are occupiers and not supposed to be there. They have no claim to the land. And once people start to realize that inside this country, we can finally make some progress. They realize that Palestine are the legal owners of the Palestinian Strip. And the Palestinians before 1948, though, I mean, the thing is that why the Palestinians of today, like I said, is that there was kind of a limbo period where ultimately Israel was not exactly formed, but at that point the British, who had already promised it to Israel, had control of it, and there was the British mandate of Palestine from like 1921 to 1948 until it was officially Israel was granted recognition. And Palestine of today, I mean, it technically exists in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, the little bits of Palestinian land that exist, but ultimately they're completely occupied. And the Israelis bomb it all the time, and the Israelis go in there and invade all the time. So it's not much of a country too much. It's ultimately just they're the rightful owners of the land, but there's nowhere really that Palestinians actually can go to inside the Israel-Palestine Strip where they're actually completely safe from the Israeli wrath. And ultimately, it'd be the equivalent of if the United States Israelis come over here, it'd be like eventually over just a span of 70 years of the United States being relegated down to just New Jersey and Connecticut or something like that. That'd be the only. That would be the American land, while the rest of it's Zionist land. That's what would be I mean, have you ever seen those maps? How would you feel if that happened? And that's what Americans don't even think about, the Palestinians, and how would they feel if that happened to the Americans? Because they don't even know that it happened. Anyways, we're 10:55. Wow, the show really just zipped by today. So thanks, all people participating in the chat room. Hopefully we continue to get a lot of interaction in the chat room, and we continue to have these great shows that we've been having recently. And on this first week of first week of August, another great show of interacting with some of you, and hopefully to people that are not aware of the whole, it's that even if you, there's the idea that some activists have that Israel is just like a satellite state of the United States, is wrong on quite a few levels, and they need to actually get informed on the full severity and the malignant nature that is the Zionist and political Zionism on a world level. Is that political Zionism goes much further. And that was my first show that I did here at UCY, was that political Zionism goes much further than just Israel in the Middle East. It goes all the way around the world. It affects the entire world. And that political Zionism is heavily intertwined with the New World Order and the banking elite of this that is trying to take over all the central banks of the planet. And there's only a few that they control the vast majority of the central banks. I mean, the Rothschilds, practically, Israel was created by the Rothschilds. And the Knesset is on, or not the Knesset, but the Israeli Supreme Court is on Rothschild Boulevard. There's the Knesset, the architect of the Knesset was a Rothschild, which the Knesset, if you don't know, is the Israeli parliament. There's all kinds of telltale signs of the Rothschilds being all over it. And the Rothschilds control almost all the world's central banks, and that seems to be a place almost dedicated to them. Some people call Israel the New World Order headquarters. It might not be quite the case, but it's definitely heavily intertwined with the New World Order, that's for sure. Israel is a thing that even if you keep reading, just learn more and more. It's definitely not every single person inside of Israel, but the culture, the government of Israel, and the history of Israel is more and more malignant as you read on. And it should be repugnant to us Americans that believe in, or we should believe in, liberty, equality for all, and actually rebelling against tyrannical authority like what exists in the Israeli government. But us Americans, not a lot of us seem to be awake to what's actually going on. So if you're not quite awake to what's going on, try to actually wake up to what's going on. Because this is what our founding fathers, this is what true Americans should do. This is a real patriotic move, to learn the truth about the Zionists, rather than fall into the false patriots and the neocon lies into supporting the Zionist wars on Syria, where they do illegal strikes, or what the Zionists have done even in Ukraine. There was one of the biggest funders. I mean, the second biggest funder of West Ukraine is Israel. They have their fingerprints all over, it seems like. All over the crimes of the planet, all over the many different murders of the planet. They got their fingerprints on the pistol. Anyways, we're on the last minute of the show. So, thanks everyone who tuned in. Thanks everyone.
One and no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge charge of the country. Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return, and if I back down